All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And unfortunately, today, Jacob's not here. He has been traveling a lot. He's saving himself for the weekend, so he is not here today. He hasn't been feeling well since he got back from Hawaii. See what happens when you go to Hawaii? You get sick, so don't go to Hawaii. With all kidding aside, it was a wonderful time. And actually, I think we have some of his the videos up there, right, Jay? From
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So
not the best audio, as most people have commented, but
okay.
they're up there if you can interpret them.
Okay, great message. Maybe a little bit soft on the audio, but we'll work on it. But thank you so much. And of course, Jacob's not here, but Jay's here. Jay, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Blessed to be here. So good
Amen.
to see you again, Margot.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure. The pleasure is mine, brother. Thank you for being with us. And of course, we have all the way from Australia, Davey. Davey's coming in and visiting with us. How you doing, Davey, today?
Howdy, pretty good, thank you, Marco. And yourself?
I'm all right. It's early in Australia, so we thank you for staying up with us. Well, not staying up, getting up early with us. So thank you for being here. And we're looking forward to possibly having Davey contribute a little bit more on the catching up. So that's a blessing always to have Davey. And David Lister, you're back.
Yeah, I need to talk to James.
We're recording now. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you want to get offline and come back on?
Yeah, I'll call James.
Okay.
Or James, can you call me?
Yeah, I'll call you right now.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. And so many of you guys are looking forward to tomorrow. Jacob's going to be at Community Church of Devore, where I pastor the church, and it'll be an awesome time. So keep Jacob in prayer in terms of his not feeling well. We look forward to him tomorrow, and Saturday, 10 a.m., Sunday, 10:30 a.m., and we look forward to having not only Jacob, but David Lister, the gospel and prophecy. So we look forward to that. Also, I wanted to mention that we also have our podcast, which if you ever wanted to know how our podcast schedule looks like, you go to the memorial.org page or the memorial.tv page, and you can find us all there. You can find us in many different platforms, from iTunes to Spotify, which are the real popular ones. Buzzsprouts is a way to put all of our podcasts into different platforms. So get a hold of that, and we'll find that there's many different days, many different schedules, and we put a lot of different audio content there, and it's been going great. People love it. Please go and visit our podcast schedule on memorial.org, memorial.tv, and get into some of your favorite, I think it's iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts. There's so many different ones to choose. You choose the best one for you. You choose the one that you want for your phone, for your iPad, for your computer. Download it, put your headphones on, and you can listen to Sandy Simpson, Jacob Prash, myself, other guests coming up in the future. So we look forward to that. It's going to be a great one. Also, if you're watching on Facebook Live, you're watching on YouTube, you're watching on Vimeo, you're watching on memorialtv.org, you're watching on, of course, our flagship, memorial.tv. If you're watching where are we at to Rumble, we love Rumble. If you're watching on, I'm missing one, Telegram, right. I get them all probably, yeah. And we welcome you, to watch Catching Up with Jacob, and then we will be going over to Backstage. Go to Backstage, and on Backstage we go to the channels where we can talk about these things, and that would be anything but YouTube or Facebook. They don't let us talk about certain things there, so you can go to Backstage and watch us there. So I think those are the only announcements that we have. David, did I miss anything?
Don't think so.
Okay, I think we got everything. I think we wanted to talk about the podcast schedule. Make sure you guys keep Jacob in prayer, and of course, we want to make sure that you know about the weekend schedule. And then Jacob's back in the UK. Jacob's back in the UK next week, and we'll continue on with catching up, and the Bible studies will continue on as such. So it is interesting, all the stuff going on in the world, catching up. And let's do that today. Let's catch up. Davey, as after this point, I know David Lister's going to come back on, and I know Jay's going to come back on. I wanted to talk about something that was really interesting. It's many people are concerned now about the apocalyptic scenarios that are unfolding all around us, despite the fact that there's extremes, right? So there's the extreme people that are saying apocalypse is coming, where see it's over, see the world's going to end. And the majority of people, though, are asleep. The majority of people are asleep. They don't take it serious. They don't understand what's going on. And I just wanted to talk about both extremes. I think both extremes are really dangerous. On the one hand, you have those who say the end of the world is tomorrow. The end of the world is next week. On the other hand, and most people are in that category, is everything's going to return back to normal. Don't worry about anything. It's just, wars have been going on, for a long time. This is just another one of those. So nothing to be concerned. And to those people, I like to say, wake up. Something's going on. And the doomsday clock has been moved up by 290 seconds from what they called point zero or the time zero, which is basically destruction. And this happened because of the Ukrainian war with Russia. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that, Davey. Is it time for people to wake up? And what do you tell people that are on the other extreme that are so mortified and fearful? I mean, are they the ones that are right? Are people that are on the other extreme saying it's no big deal, let's get back to normal? Are they the ones that are right? And how should we, in your opinion, approach a situation where the doomsday clock actually has moved to 90 seconds until time zero?
Well, both extremes are wrong, and both extremes can cause harm. Jacob has warned many times about rambunctious, about people who get.
That's right.
It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf story. It's kind of like who make a mountain out of a molehill every time something happens. That can be just as bad as ignoring what's going on altogether. We do see both extremes, especially here. You don't get much middle ground here. You do get the extremes. You've got those who are getting caught up. Unfortunately, those who are waking up, because there's very little good Bible teaching around here, there's very little good resources, they're going to the internet to find answers, to find out about what's going on. And they're getting caught up in all the conspiracy theories and nonsense that's out there. And that's just as bad as those having their heads buried in the sand. But people do need to wake up, look at the signs, look at them from a biblical point of view. First and foremost, it should be for us, what does the scripture say? What does the scripture say we need to be looking out for? What are they telling us to be aware of? But the signs are just everywhere at the moment, and it amazes me that people are ignorant or oblivious to what's going on around them. Actually, when you talked on Jeremiah on Wednesday, actually you talked about a number of things going on in our world today, like the murders,
violence is through the roof.
Yeah, the immorality, the drug use that is everywhere, that's rampant nowadays, and the theft that's going on at every level of our society, not just the flesh mobs that we see going on now, but happening in all levels of government and corporations. It's just unbelievable, yet people still are ignorant. People don't want to wake up and sort of see what's really going on.
Yeah, the doomsday clock is actually run by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which basically was started way back in 1941 by Albert Einstein, with the idea of trying to 1945, sorry, by Albert Einstein, thinking about the idea of how close we can get to the destruction of humanity via atomic weapons. This is, of course, University of Chicago, Oppenheimer, and Einstein wanted to sort of set some kind of theoretical clock, but with some practical application, that the world is coming to some kind of close to an end because of the atomic weapons that we've never had before. We've never had this technology. And he even admitted the fact that this is very dangerous for humanity if it falls obviously in the wrong hands. Now we have so many nations that have atomic capability, atomic nuclear weapons, and in the hands of very evil dictators that could destroy humanity time and time and time again, many times over. So I would like to think the fact that there is some validity to looking at humanity and how close we're getting to our own self-propel extinction, and think about the signs that Jesus said, and think about the fact that Jesus warned about all the signs going on in the world. However, as Christians, we don't believe that this is the end of the world. We don't believe this is the end of the world. As Christians, we believe this is the end of the age. And I think it's very important for Christians to really clarify, because we have a hope beyond the grave. We have a hope beyond this current world system, is the fact that Jesus is coming back to establish his kingdom. So we don't believe the end of the world. I know movies and Hollywood, and I think sometimes Christians get their theology or eschatology from movies and scientific books. I think we have to make it clear that you said rambunction is bad. Ignorance is probably even worse, because people not knowing what is going to happen. And I think Jesus talked about what happened in the days of Noah. They went around their day, they went about their life, drinking and eating and marrying and giving in marriage. None of that is evil. None of that is bad or sinful. But the sin was, and what Jesus was talking about, the sin was just aloofness or purposeful ignorance toward what was happening in their day. And then the door was shut, it says. Noah went in the ark, the door was shut, and then the end came for them, in that generation. So I think there's some validity to the fact that when we bring the stuff up, it has to be within the context of truth, within the context of what's really going on in the world. Yes, these are dangerous times, and I want to talk about what they're saying. The new doomsday clock was moved because of the war in Ukraine and Russia. Now, there's no doubt that the Biden administration, Western governments, Australia, UK, New Zealand, the EU, the European nations have all been on the side of Ukraine, all proponing, at least the US, Canada, and the UK, as well as Europe, giving weapons into Ukraine. And I think this is the reason why it got moved up, is the foreign minister of Germany admitted basically, we need to support Ukraine because we're in a war with Russia. Now that's very telling. And I think maybe a lot of backroom talk has been done that way, but now she said it publicly. We are in a war with Russia, speaking of NATO, speaking of Germany. And that sent the doomsday clock people pushing the clock ahead to what destruction would be like. And at the same time, alerting everybody around that, hey, this is a war that has been going on since last February, and now it's still here with no sign of ending. There's really no off-ramp. There's no one talking about peace. For as much as, in some cases, I agree with Donald Trump, sometimes I disagree with them. In this case, I agree with them. He says, why isn't anybody talking about peace? All you need is nukes to fly, and then everybody's going to start flying nukes. Why don't we just end it with peace? On the one hand, I totally agree. Why isn't nobody talking with peace? Nobody's talking about peace. Biden administration, the UK, the EU, all are saying, let's arm, escalate. And at some point, I think Russia is going to take that very seriously. And it might be now. We're approaching a year into the war, and the Russians are now so invested in this war. Personally, Davey, I don't think they're going to back down that easily. I don't know what's your take on it, but I think we're on a track of a collision, because I don't think Russia's going to back down. I don't think that NATO's going to back down. I think there's so much money that has gone into this war by the Biden administration specifically, that I don't think anyone's going to say, you know what, we're just messing around. We're just kidding. It's not that serious. Let's take it back. I think it's just going to escalate. What's your take on the war?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Marco. I think it's only going to escalate, especially now with the talk that the NATO forces are talking about wanting to take back Crimea.
Yeah.
I think it's only going to escalate. With the money that's being poured in, like Canada is going to follow US lead now and send more weapons, tanks and stuff. And the German minister having actually come out openly, basically saying that we're at war with Russia. We've got that declaration of war now. But I saw a good video on Twitter during the week. Someone had taken the song Out of Vida and the money kept rolling in. And just with the weapons, the money that's been pouring into Ukraine, just the billions and billions, and then they still want more and billions and billions. And yet they're still doing the same thing Eva Peronin that did, living the lavish lifestyle, the mansions, the sports cars, while the average Ukrainian is living in poverty and struggling to get food.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think they all want this war because war is profitable for a lot of them. The Biden administration is making money. Ukraine's just been kind of like a money laundry facility for a lot of them.
It's the hub. It's the hub of all sorts of corruption.
But yeah, Putin's not going to sit by idly and not do nothing, especially if NATO forces decided they're going to try and annex Crimea back.
Yeah, let me tell you some of the weapons that are going there. And I think some people have said, well, it's not a big deal. They're not that big of an issue. But Lockheed said that they're ready for F-16s to go to Ukraine, F-16 fighter jets, 3 additional B-52 bombers flying to unknown locations. I'm not saying they're going to Ukraine, but maybe. Leopard tanks, Leopard 2 tanks from Germany. From Canada, other tanks from the US, Abrams tanks may be going there. So the one thing again, Davey, no attempts to negotiate for peace. In fact, Russia has said, well, if they're doing that, we're going to put our warships with hypersonic missiles in the Atlantic. So nobody is speaking peace. I guess one guy that would maybe, thinking about doing that is for peace is the Croatian president. The Croatian president, he calls Germany madness. He says, madness. Look what happened 70 years ago, he said. Russian forces and German forces went at it and millions died. I said, he doesn't want to see this again. I mean, there's, for all its faults and for all its, ungodliness that it's in the world, there are some people that still see, perhaps maybe not in a good light, but they still see peace as a way to get out of this mess. And, from Trump to Croatian president to others are talking about peace, but very few, very, very few. In fact, the minority. And you said money talks, it's very profitable. I think these high-ranking Ukrainian officials that got caught with corruption charges, from prostitution to racketeering, from, taking money, taking weapons, selling them. Nobody knows exactly all that has gone on. Canada is even giving more money to Ukraine. The IMF wants to give $16 more billion to Ukraine in aid package. So the money keeps flowing, corruption keeps growing, and nobody cares for peace.
Yeah, this is a war that they want to happen, unfortunately.
No, you're 100% right. Even I was listening to the Ukrainian Catholic Archbishop, which, it's not that I agree with Catholicism, but he's advising that all the corruption that's going on with Zelensky, all the things that he's doing against banning Orthodox communities within his own country, it's important to understand Zelensky is no friend of Ukrainian conservatives or Ukrainian religious Ukrainians, he says, because he's doing this to his own people, shutting them out at a time where, there's a need for hope, there's a need for peace, and there's a need for, maybe people to go and pray. Like I said, I'm not talking about, that I agree with the Catholic Church, but in need of hope and people that need to find God, he actually is becoming a dictator in that matter. that he's shutting down anybody who disagrees with them, because the Catholic Church as well as the Orthodox Church have been pretty boisterous about what he's been doing to Orthodox communities. So, we talked about it here, that he's no friend of, Zelensky's no friend of anybody except money.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't see it, I'm hoping I'm wrong. And I hope that I'm wrong big time. But I don't think this is going to de-escalate anytime soon. And I hate to think the fact that, it could be a war, but I think a war has been happening since last February. People have died, soldiers have been killed, civilians have been, arrested and killed as well. Money has been flowing, weapons have been sold or given to Ukraine, and Russians have gone into the eastern part of Ukraine. Now it's Donetsk and Luhansk is part of Russia territory. So it's escalated, and sometimes it's a little bit slow, and then it happens in burst, and then it's slow again, then it happens in burst, and we are where we are now. Hey Jay, you're back.
I'm back.
All right. We've been talking about the Ukrainian war and the doomsday clock, and part of the reason they moved it up was because of what's been going on with the armaments, Germans' seemingly declaration of war, and what Zelensky's doing, the corruption with the Ukrainian officials, the money flowing from even the IMF, Canada, the US. So should people be worried, Jay, or is it just going to blow over, in your opinion? Or maybe the extreme guys are really the ones that are right, that's saying, this is it, we're done.
Well, I guess I would answer with a question. Is there any war or large worldwide conflict that does not begin with Germany causing some kind of problem? And for the German representative to say that openly, it's very telling. It's very telling. Since when does a country that has relied on the US for so many years to provide their defense, provide for their defense, get the chutzpah to actually proclaim there's a war between the West and Russia?
Yeah.
To be clear, there's a war between Ukraine and Russia, and if you were to examine it, that conflict was bound to happen. But this proxy war, this Afghanistan in Europe, this is good for no one, because now we're dealing with nuclear powers.
Yeah. So, I get why the doomsday clocks moved. And you know what? And David, we're talking about this. You know what? Perhaps, and maybe I'll take it from a different angle. This may wake people up to the reality that we are not immortal, in a sense of, we're not going to live forever. We are, humanity is very fragile, and we need God. We need God to intervene in the affairs of man. And, we pushed him out so far into extreme circumstances in some countries. And look what's happened. Look what society becomes. Nations become without God. And perhaps by this just very active doomsday clock, it sounds apocalyptic, they said. And I would say, although it's not the end, as the Bible foretells the end will come in a different way, it is right for people to fear, and maybe they would consider God. Maybe they would consider repentance and faith and the only Savior that God has promised to this world, and that's Christ, that's Jesus Christ. So it is, I think it's imperative that as Christians, we don't, Jay Davey was talking about rambunctious, we don't lose our mind and our head and get into the frenzy, but as Christians to proclaim a sobering message of truth, faith, and repentance, and getting back to what the Word of God teaches, and getting back to faith, getting back to Christ, and getting back to for the churches to get back to preaching and making disciples, which is the only way you're going to have peace in the world, is through the Prince of Peace. Among nations, among people. Eventually we will have peace among nations. He will rule among the nations, Isaiah 2 says, and will bring peace, and will turn the plowshares, the spears into plowshares, and swords into pruning hooks. So we're going to have that peace in the world one day, but it's not yet. Until now, we preach the gospel of peace, because men need peace with God and then we'll have peace with each other. But until then, Jesus foretold us we're going to have these wars and rumors of war. And he even told us, right, Davey, be not frightened. The end is not yet. So Christians have this sobering and truthful message that the end's not going to come through this, but there will be devastating effects along the way.
Yeah.
Which is what we don't want. We don't want to see devastation, along the way for individuals that could be saved out of it. That's the point. Individuals can be saved out of these horrifying events that seemingly are looming over in the horizon by the bulletin of atomic scientists saying we're 90 seconds away, basically, from doomsday.
Also, Marco,
point,
just wanted to mention, the scriptures tells us that every person that believes in Christ needs to be a minister of reconciliation. Reconciliation is reconciling not only man to God, but man to man.
Amen.
And these people beating the war drums, how can they call themselves ministers of reconciliation? They're not. And we as the church need to be fighting against those people that are calling for more division, calling for more war, calling for more violence against other people. Ministers of reconciliation is a serious responsibility that every Christian is called to do.
Yeah, you know what's crazy, and this happened. Not everybody's like this, but what's crazy? I've seen, and I talked to Davey when the war started back in 2022. There were Christian groups and ministries and even pastors, some of them who were, because of their eschatological view of the end, they were actually fine with war, and they were actually content that this war just basically, hey, this means that Jesus is coming soon, so we should be okay with this war. And and Russia's evil, so we should be okay with attacking evil and things like that. It was the craziest thing. These were Christian pastors and ministries who almost gloating at the fact that there's war. And I just remember when I was a young Christian, that there was a man that I was witnessing to at my work. I worked for a grocery store, and because things were going on in the world, and I would tell them about what I knew at the time about the gospel and about Jesus is coming as a great hope. And he'd known about something in his mind, knew about the end, or he's been told, or maybe he went to church before. And he said, well, aren't you Christians supposed to be happy with bad events going on in the world? Aren't Christians supposed to be elated that things are bad happening in the world so Jesus can come? And it took me by surprise that he said that, because I never thought about the way the world thinks about Christians, that we always think about it's going to be doom, it's going to be gloom, and it's going to be bad. But that's good, because that means Jesus is coming. And there were Christians like this now, that they think this is good in the sense of Jesus is coming. And I couldn't be any more against war. I could be, I'm like probably the most anti-war person you can imagine. Christians don't want war. Christians don't desire wars. Christians don't want bad things to happen to this world. But we know things are going to happen in this world. That's I think the difference. I don't think we should gloat on it. But anyway, I just thought that point, because so many people just, in some pastors who have a wrong eschatology, in my opinion, would say, well, it's good because it means this. And I don't think the Bible ever says this is good. It just says this is bad, but things will get better.
It told us to watch and wait, not to pick up a gun and pray. False prophets in Christianity do call for war, and it's kind of like they've hooked up with, they always talk about the Christian nationalists. And I think there is something to be said that there is a nationalism that is trying to go back to the days of the Crusades. And I don't understand that stance at all.
Yeah.
I understand about defensive wars. I understand about protecting your family. You will never get a complaint from me on that. But to sit there and try to conquer the world for Christ, I think that should be something of a relic of the past at this point in our history.
a new podcast is going to be coming on. It's called Ken's Corner, and Ken's going to be dealing with a lot of that, what you said, Jay, about Christian nationalism through the NAR. And the New Apostolic Reformation has infiltrated politics so deep here and also in Israel that there is that sort of extremist Christian nationalism stuff, not biblical Christianity, but a Christianity that aligns himself with war in order to do good, and that is, it's antithetical to the teaching of Jesus. It is antithetical to the apostles and what they preached about Christ and the gospel. I'm not saying pacifism, like you just talked about that. We're not saying pacifism in a sense of like you don't do anything if somebody tries to attack you or your wife or your kids or anything like that. But it is, and we're talking about the annihilation of the world for the purposes of Christ. That's not Christian. Jesus said, "Put away your sword." And Jesus said, if you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. So the other thing I was going to bring up is the reason they moved it up as well, the doomsday clock, was because two things. And one, we can talk about it for a little bit. The other one, I think it's more intriguing, is what they call space rocks, meteor showers coming upon the Earth, some of them coming very close this year to the Earth, traveling about 33,000 miles per hour and coming close to the Earth in what they call only, quote unquote, only about 7,000 miles from the center of the Earth. Traveling at that speed will be devastating. So these scientists look at the potential and the possibility of it, and they say, boy, this could be catastrophic. I will agree. The other one is climate change. They say it's a concern because we don't have many alternatives to fossil fuel, and we don't have renewable energy established in the world. So I wanted to throw it, back to you guys, and maybe piggyback on those two things. Should we be concerned about space rocks flying into the Earth, and should we be concerned for this 2030 event that they say is going to be a climate change catastrophe unless we do something about it? Those are the other reasons they moved it up, which was kind of unusual. The war would have been itself big enough to change the clock, but they said no, it's just also meteor showers, space rocks that they call it, and climate change, which has sort of deflated the purpose of the doomsday clock, in my opinion. But anyway, what do you think, Jay? Is this sufficient to be alarmed, space rocks and climate change?
You said the word sufficient, and it triggered a scripture. Sufficient to today is the evil thereof.
Don't worry about tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what can we do if a rock hits? I mean, are we going to shoot missiles at it? What can man do?
They're thinking about doing that. They literally have talked about shooting a nuclear missile to one of these space rocks to sort of, just move it out of the way, they said, or just, off orbit, just, a little bit nudge. They actually use the word nudge off orbit.
I seem to recall a Hollywood movie where they did that, and instead of having one projectile hitting the Earth, they had several now.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, what kind of change can we really affect to a giant space rocket hitting the Earth?
Yeah.
In my mind, very little. What can we do with the doomsday clock as far as wars and countries fighting each other? I think we have a little bit more, not much, but we have a little bit more pull there.
That's very true. Very true. David, what do you think? The space rocks, climate change, are these doomsday clock things?
Well, both of them are kind of a little bit more of a fear-mongering thing, I kind of think.
Yeah.
I guess I look at God as creator and how he's positioned the Earth, where he has in the orbit that he has at a particular distance from the sun. God's care in the way he has created this planet is really mind-blowing. So I guess the idea of space rocks doesn't really kind of impact me sort of much at all. It's kind of like I know God's in control of all that, and the climate change aspect is, well, that's one of the new narratives they want to push. And if they were really actually serious about the environment and stuff like that, they wouldn't be doing half the stuff that they're actually doing. It's going to be a case of the cure is going to be worse than the cause. We've been hearing a lot of fear mongering for years when it comes to climate change, and I think it was like back in the 70s we were told we were only going to have another 5 years to save the planet and all the rest of it, and what is it now?
Yeah.
2023 or something now. It's kind of like
that's they keep moving it out though. And Davey, you and I are old enough to remember acid rain and the ozone layer being depleted and a hole in it, and it was going to be over by 2020. We wouldn't even be around by then. It is a lot of fear mongering for sure.
And the crazy thing that gets me with that is too, it always comes from these people who are kind of like evolutionists who believe in evolution. It's kind of like, okay, what is it? Don't they believe in like survival of the fittest and that anyhow? Why should it worry them? You know, to me, it's a mental tilt. It doesn't make sense with me.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to bring up with the climate change is, and it's something David Lister, who's not on right now, but he turned me on to this. He'd been watching a documentary on South American lithium fields. And I had talked to him about the Congo lithium mines, and the cobalt mines that are in the Congo, and how that is an essential piece for a lot of this electric cars, because the World Economic Forum, you know, whatever we want to call the world system today, it is bent on electric future. And it said to have an electric future, you need batteries. And these idea of batteries needs cobalt, lithium, and lithium fields in South America are big money. I mean, they found a lot of it in South America. Here in the United States, I'm not sure about Australia, Davey, but here in the United States, it's in Nevada, places like that near the desert. I don't know if lithium has been, I know Australia has a big solar, they move big into solar, but is lithium pretty big down there?
Yes, Western Australia.
Western Australia. Okay. So these lithium fields in South America are basically replacing fossil fuel. They hope that they'll replace fossil fuel. Now, some of the examples here that I pulled up is by 2030, they want 60% of new cars to be electric. 60% by 2030. That's only 7 years from now. And the example is 12 kilograms of lithium it's needed for one Tesla Model S. Some cars need more, some cars need less, but that's the average, 12 kilograms of lithium. And I think David Lister did the math on it of how much water it's needed just to produce like 30 cars. It's like millions of gallons of water just for producing a small amount of cars, but that you need in order to process the lithium. Not even thinking about the fact that these lithium fields with carbon, I think they're like carbonate, lithium carbonate is how they find them in the earth, are also, if you extract them from the earth, they're going to totally destroy the environment. They're going to destroy the soil, degradation. They're going to destroy the water pollution, and shortages. They're going to destroy the ecosystem and any animals and birds and humans that live in that area. So they said this is worse than fossil fuel and gas, looking and mining or drilling for gas and drilling for natural gas and oil. So is it really any better? In the cobalt mines, kids die because of poison. They die in the mines because of the danger. They die in the mines because of suffocation. And it's because you need little children to go into those mines because of the crevices that they have to climb into. It's an abuse of children in that regard. So are we really doing any better to humanity by trying to have this 2030 vision of utopia less cars that are fossil fuel, more renewable energy. It doesn't sound like it's going to be of any good.
1 ton of lithium takes 1 million liters of water to refine.
Whoa. Wow.
And if you are a person that is into ESG, if you are a person that loves the environment, you can no longer be ignorant to the game that's being played. The people that are pushing battery technology, that are pushing green energy, they don't want to save the planet. They want to deepen their pocketbook. And how are they going to do that? The same way that the oil tycoons did it in the past. They're going to strip mine and they're going to pollute.
Yeah.
So your brave new world of electric energy, which you won't even be able to use, because if you stop using fossil fuels, you cannot charge the lithium batteries that you're creating. California just proved that. So if you really want to be naive and go on to believe that you're doing good by buying an electric vehicle without understanding the logistics that go into creating that battery and the ecological damage that go into it, you are literally a salmon that is trying to go up a stream that's no longer there because they took the water to make the batteries.
You have been played, and you have been played, and but people, I suppose I can take this approach, but it doesn't matter, right, Jay? As long as people feel good about themselves, right? That's really the most important thing. As long as you feel good about yourself, that's really what counts, right?
No.
It's not.
There is truth.
Yeah. It's not if you are a man, it's just if you feel like a man. That's really the most important thing, right? You see how truth has become so maligned, so subjective. They blurt it out and people don't know anything. I don't think this kind of thinking could have passed with our grandparents and our grandparents and parents. This thinking it only works in society where the society stopped thinking. They corrupted their thinking and their mind by the media and themselves willingly. But there's been such a dumbing down of America. I'm just going to take it from the American perspective. Davey, you can chime in on the Australian side perspective. But I remember reading a book. I think it was late 90s. It was called the deliberate dumbing down of America, and that was then. And I read it and I thought, is this really happening? Because I'm a product of school systems and government schools and stuff like that and I became a Christian, and then things changed. The way I thought, the way I looked at life and future and things like that, it changed. But without Christ, I think I would have been pretty much going along with this, because I think it's a spiritual thing as well as a mental thing. And if people are spiritually are dead, then their minds can be corrupted so easily.
Yes, it is environmental worship. It's kind of like people care more about so-called saving the planet, which they're not. They're going to end up with something much worse. I think of like Queenstown in Tasmania, say 20 years ago, but much worse and much more widespread, the environmental damage. Yeah, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. We're just going to end up with a big ecological mess. But this is the thing: they care more about the planet. They care more about saving the planet than what they do about the kids being forced to in the mines to work.
Yeah,
they're supporting child labor. They're supporting the conditions they work in is just abysmal.
Yeah,
it should be happening this day anywhere, yet this is what they're doing, and it's just not working. Already in the UK, you're paying more to charge your electric vehicle than what you would be paying to fill up with gasoline. It's already just prohibitively expensive, and it really hasn't taken off yet. They're trying to ban cars altogether, but that's another story.
That's another story. That's right. So it's much more about control and about control and destruction of people than it is about anything else. You know, obviously it's money, but that money is being used for control, they're pocketing it, controlling people, and eventually bringing a world that they can control. And I'm talking about in the globalist idea, in the globalist environment, in the World Economic Forum with the UN and all the world, acronyms that exist, World Bank, World Health Organization. It's really about control, money, power, and controlling health too.
Yes. Yep, for sure. And actually, I saw a video during the week of all the different windmills around the world. The power. A number of them just exploding, catching fire.
Really?
Yeah, the world over. It's kind of like, and some of them not that old. It's the gas inside, the gas that they need inside them. Just gets to that point, and suddenly they just explode. Blades go flying.
That's pretty amazing. I had no idea. I didn't even know that was happening.
You remember when those I forget which group that they were throwing like paint, basically to protest climate change. They're throwing orange paint. My question is, was that paint water soluble? Did that go into the water table, the chemicals, when they were throwing it on the street? Were they polluting?
I don't think so. I think that paint is a special paint that they have that only liberals can use.
Oh yeah,
and that paint does not affect anything. It's just
paint. It helps. It helps. Animals love it. They eat it. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's like Schwab paint or something like that. It's just a great paint that doesn't affect anything. Yeah, Schwab's. Yeah, but it is true. I mean, it is quite a thing to remember all this, that the environmental movement has been around for a long time. It's morphed into different things. It's now bigger than ever, and now they're affecting. I think it was Jay brought up ESG. Yeah. It's going to affect social credit scores. It's going to affect corporate credit score, and how much money is going to come into corporations, states, all across the board in the name of environmentalism, which I think Davey talked about. It is a religion. It's a cult. It is a religion. They got a manifesto, and they got leaders, and they got priests.
And like most religions, it's a shell game where while you're being preached to, they're reaching into your pocket in many cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to bring this up really quick, as we talked about how they don't care for children, and they don't care for anything else that regarding to children trafficking, the child labor laws. But this was kind of telling, and just want you to comment on this. This is in New York City, the courthouse in New York City. This is a new statue they've unveiled. It's a demon. And the artist does admit it is a divine being, a spiritual being. It's a demon statue of a woman coming out of a lotus, and this is on top of the courthouse to honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg and abortion. And it's placed right along the side of Moses and Zoroaster. The picture right there. This is the artist. This is the demon. She's done other pictures of that demon, and I think you pointed it out that she's wearing the same kind of outfit that Ginsburg used to wear, for her when she was Supreme Court Justice. So it is definitely honoring her, and it's sanctioned as an urgent, listen to this, necessary cultural reckoning. It's underway as New York considers traditional representations of power in public spaces and recast civic structures to better reflect 21st century social mores. So they tell you why they're doing it. We're replacing the old with something new. It's for women's rights. It's for abortion. It's for Ginsburg. You know what? I can't think of a better depiction of Ginsburg, but a demon. But this is crazy. This is.
I agree 100% with the artist depiction. If Ginsburg did not repent and turn to Jesus, she is definitely where that demon belongs. And everyone who follows Ginsburg's ideology of what is women's rights, they're heading to the same location.
Very well said. I mean, what Ginsburg fought for women's rights, but what she did in that process was destroy women's lives and children's lives at the same time. And she's a hero. Go ahead, Davey.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, if they wanted to represent Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they certainly got the demon part right. But my question is, how do they know? How do they know it's a woman?
Oh, see, you can't ask questions like that, Davey. That's going to get us off of YouTube. You can't ask questions like that. We might get banned tomorrow. So, yeah, exactly. Move over Moses, right? You have a new female lawgiver, it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the demon. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen real quick here so we can go back to it. But it's the perfect depiction of how America is like today. Abortion is celebrated, abortion is medicated now. I was reading about the West Virginia law, which I thought it was interesting, and I'm in favor of the West Virginia lawmakers, because they said, you know what, manufacturing of abortion pills not allowed in West Virginia. You can even they're trying. I don't know if they passed it. Maybe I'm speaking out of ignorance, but I don't know if they passed it. But they are working on a legislation not to allow transgender surgeries for children in West Virginia. To that, the medical establishment and the left and women's movements and all that have come out with their fangs against West Virginia and the Attorney General there, Patrick Morsi, because he's not allowing the destruction of children, just like we talked about the lithium fields and all that. So as soon as you stand up and says, nope, no more, I'm not going to tolerate the destruction of children, then you're destroyed by the world and its mores, the new mores of society, New York City says. So I don't know. Did you guys hear about that ban of abortion medication in West Virginia?
I heard about it, and I think it's a great step. I thought that there was such a thing as states' rights, but I'm not sure if that's true in Biden's America. I think it's more of federal uber alles.
That died with Obama for sure. And but it's funny, when Trump was president, they all hung on to that states' rights. We can't allow this man to federally tell us what to do. And oh man, what a mess. And
resistant states.
Yeah, resistant states. What do they call those? Where you can actually sanctuary states. Yeah,
sanctuary states. Yeah.
Oh man, Davey, it's the abortion medication there, the pills, pretty big in Australia. I don't know about that.
That's something I'm not too sure on. I can look into it though.
Yeah, because here, obviously, it's been passed. Some of these medications have been approved by the FDA and passed along, and I think actually in California, correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, but you can walk into a CVS and get it, or Walgreens or something like that. So I think so. And
I believe you're correct. It's not non-prescription, I believe.
Yeah, I maybe I talked to my friend Patty about that, if she knows exactly who's selling it, because I remember signing a petition for CVS not to sell it. This is a drugstore here, not to sell it, and I don't know where that went. But the Biden administration is really for the for the destruction of children. Speaking of children, in this regard, have you guys heard about Yuma, Arizona, not too far from where I'm standing, and the brink of collapse because unprecedented migration. The migrant surge has totally just been basically has overwhelmed any border patrol. They can't handle it anymore. And the idea here is, of course, drug cartels. The drug cartel, the trafficking of children and women, sex trafficking of women and children. It is at an all-time high. It's on the brink of collapse. Hospitals and food banks in Yuma are not able to handle the amount of people coming in. So it's crumbling. The infrastructure there is crumbling. El Paso the same way, but this is about Yuma. So it's Biden. Is the Biden administration co-conspirators with this, Jay, with the cartel?
we're not allowed to know these things. Okay, I'm going to go by exactly what the Biden administration says. There's no problem at the border. In fact, I'm going to go and talk to Mexico and Canada, and we're going to just be this one big conglomerate of the North American Union. And we just need to make sure that there are more abortions in Mexico. Once we do that, there'd be no more problem with immigrants. So that we have to make sure that they push the abortion rights in Mexico.
Yeah, and the homosexual rights too. That's a big thing that
Correct.
they want to push in. So it isn't. So you bring up a good point. So there's no border issue because there are no borders. If there are no borders, there are no issues. So why pass a law that it's moot? Because you need a border. Well, you need a law for the border, but if you don't have a border, you don't need a law.
Yeah. And they're coming to America to find jobs, which we're slowly turning over to machines and computers.
Yeah.
No, we don't. There's no disaster there. There's no major disaster of unemployment coming. Not at all. Everything's rosy. Everything's fine. The president's going to go make some hot dogs. The economy is as sound as can be. Don't worry. We've got this under control. Trust me.
I know Australia has a very different laws, and Dave, you correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're very strict in terms of immigration. Is that right?
Yes, they have been. I'm not sure about the current government, but they have been in the past.
Yeah. I think Albanese let all the Chinese citizens come in, the CCP come into Australia and become citizens there. But here in the States, it's kind of it's a bizarre thing because they want a blanket of amnesty, and that includes the trafficking of drugs. We'll talk about that in a moment, but the trafficking of children and women for prostitution. This is skyrocketing here in California. Oh my, if you want to know a problem, Jay, tell us more. If you want to know a problem, go down the street, pick a street in the LA area, and what would you find?
You would find homelessness tents in some areas, but more than often you're going to find women being prostituted, women being sold as if they're chattel. It's unfortunately, again, they don't matter according to our modern politicians. They're voluntarily there, which is not the case in most cases. Right.
In most cases.
Yet it's increasing because there's a class of people, especially fortunately in Los Angeles, that don't care because they're willing clients to what is in total truth modern day slavery.
It is modern day slavery, and you're seeing basically what in the Roman Empire, what they did. They would bring children and women from other nations, bring them in. They would adopt their gods sometimes in those cases if they conquer that area, and the children would become their slaves or sacrifices to their gods. And I think we talked about that here with Jacob one time. This is exactly what's going on, and how if you read some of the history of the church, how Christians would adopt these little girls and these boys and these young men who were being prostituted, were being left for dead and orphans in the streets of Rome because they had no use for them anymore. Mm-hmm. And it was the Christians who actually took in these children, and that was the next generation of believers who suffered tremendously, of course, under the rule of the emperors. Are we revisiting that? You guys think that we're revisiting that again?
We absolutely are, and it's a tidal wave where you have people coming into the country that are being subjected to this, and then later down the line, when they get sick, they're impacting the medical system. Later on, when they need benefits, they're impacting the financial system. It is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, but no, instead of actually saving money for taking care of this, let's send it over to Europe so we can fight and kill other people.
In the UK, because of the policies of their administration, and of course the new prime minister hasn't done anything about it. Parliament hasn't done anything about it. The migration, the boat migrants coming in daily. And of course, that's in the UK, but in France and Europe, it is the same thing from a different perspective. These migrants come from Africa. The migrants here come from, mainly Latin America, and in a lot of cases, even China. And that is overwhelming those systems there. So it is an overwhelming amount of migration coming in because, let's face it, George Soros and his open border society want that to happen in order to bring about a borderless system where everybody's just a citizen of the world. And therefore, it's a lot easier to control people that way. It's a lot easier to control people that way.
If borders were not important, the Chinese would not have built the Great Wall of China. I really want you to understand this concept. They built a wall for thousands of miles because borders are important.
Yeah.
But according to our politicians now, they are not. They're denying reality.
They are denying reality for sure. And if politicians would have their way, especially in California, what they have done, like you talked about what you find in LA. I wanted to play this quick video. This is from 2008. This is a man who I think the Democratic Party wants to be the next president. Yeah.
We believe fundamentally that food solves hunger, that shelters solve sleep, and that housing solves homelessness. And if we're going to solve the problem of those that are out on the streets that we define as homeless, we better solve the housing problem if we're going to have an impact. And that's why we established this framework, what we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco. That's why we established this framework, what we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco.
Hasn't worked out, did not work out as well.
If food solved hunger, California's food production went down because he cut water to the Central Valley, which grows most of the food. Yeah. If building homes ends homelessness, then why are the permit restrictions and everything else as far as building codes so draconian in California? If you would like to see what America will look like under the leadership and presidency of our dear, wonderful leader up in Sacramento, go to San Francisco, do a tour of Chinatown, and understand that it's coming to every city of America if he's put into office.
What a mess. Yeah. This is what he said in 2008. He's going to solve it. They're not solving anything. In fact,
it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
Worse.
The fact that this man's still the government. Go ahead, Davey.
Oh, just with the open border policy, the drugs have just been flowing in via China through Mexico. The fentanyl problem in the state is just gone through the roof. And then let's help them by giving them the safe injecting for facilities, or whatever they call them over there.
Yeah.
And every single thing possible to exacerbate the problem, nothing to solve it. And just going back to the prostitution before, he touts it as being a great achievement, like the celebration of legalizing of sex workers. A lot of them are underage. Some as young as 12, 15, I believe. And the mental health problems they have because of it. I think you were reading to us from an article earlier on, and I think the average time one of those poor people have to commit a sexual act today is around about 21 times.
Yep. 21 times a day with different guys.
Yep. And that's what New boast in?
Yeah, it is completely not. I mean, liberals usually are the ones that they tout themselves as humanitarians. There's nothing human. I mean, it's the destruction of humanity in their souls and in their spirit, and they're the criminals. They're the criminals of today. But because they wear a suit and they sit in the White House or in some kind of parliament or in some, they're not arrested. In fact, they have they have immunity. They have immunity from any legal things. You brought up the fentanyl thing, Davey. This is interesting. I don't know how big Snapchat is in Australia, but here in America, there's an app called Snapchat. It's kind of like what TikTok. It's the beginning of a few years ago. It came out 2016, 2015, something like that. And a lot of kids love it because it has all these filters and you can change your face and all that stuff. And it's pretty weird. And they have these messages that can self-destruct within a few minutes. It's just they disappear. And one of the things that they have done is investigate Snapchat's role in fentanyl death. They are the most self-destructive thing. One of the most self-destructive things you can do in for your kids is let them go on Snapchat, and it's being investigated now because it's easy to traffic fentanyl to kids, not only by the videos they post, by the messages, where you can get it, who you can talk to, who you can contact. And Snapchat has done very little about limiting this. And so they have these self-destructing messages, they call it. So you take a message, you send it out, within a few minutes, it's gone. And kids are buying fentanyl, are getting fentanyl, and they're dying. And an Iowa family had to file a lawsuit against Snapchat because there was a young girl that died because she obtained fentanyl on the platform, and nothing is being done about it until now. I guess you could say it took a man named Jim Carroll who was basically dealing with this and finally brought it up to the FBI. They are Snapchat and those technology platforms have basically allowed a complete destruction of children because of the ease of fentanyl and drugs, especially Snapchat. I'm sure Google, I'm sure Twitter used to be that with what they call OnlyFans, basically young girls, becoming involved in prostitution and pornography, and people paying to see these girls online nude. And so it is a cesspool of not only violence, but it's a cesspool of sex, a cesspool of drugs, and kids are dying. It's no question about it. Kids are being killed because of the overdose of fentanyl sold through these tech companies.
There is no feminism in a world of sexual exploitation of women.
Oh, that's very true.
There is absolutely no women's rights where women are objectified and turned into nothing more than pleasure for men, or worse, turned into money mills for men. And when you have OnlyFans, when you have prostitution, that's what they become. Again, they become chattel. They don't become human. They become something to be bought and sold. And it's crazy that feminism, of all things, is not fighting the exploitation of women.
That's right. They should be up in arms about that. They're the ones who should be up in arms about young girls being exploited, young women being exploited, trafficked. No, nothing. In fact,
and the only
go ahead.
And the only change that will come is when men start being men again and not allowing this to happen.
Yeah, please, men, be godly men, especially Christian men. You talked about this, Jay. Alphabet, the Alphabet company, Google, and all that. Antitrust lawsuit against them. Federal officials say Google is dominance in the market is illegal competition. So the DOJ, much as I don't like them in this administration, just filed an antitrust law against Google. Anything coming out of that, Jay? You think maybe something good? I mean, optimism?
I want to be optimistic. I really want to be optimistic, but something tells me that, they're just going to go and the people that are put on Google's alphabet board, on YouTube's board, are just gonna, say, we have these people that are our envoys. We've had a relationship in the past. We got to kind of distance ourselves. So we're gonna go ahead and investigate. But don't worry, they'll be back in their offices, because we know in the past that the government has put people in these tech companies as liaisons between them. And now they're gonna investigate. The DOJ, which put people there before as friendly advisors, are now going to investigate the friendly advisors.
Yeah,
makes no sense. I
Well,
want to believe,
yeah.
but I can't.
You see the Twitter files. I mean, if anything, you have to know Twitter files. FBI, DOJ, Department. Everybody in the government had a hand in Twitter, in some form or another. And CIA, FBI. I mean, they were there. They were there. They were throttling it. They were destroying accounts. They were doing exactly the bidding of the administration. So, yeah, I think Google is infected with that.
Oh, absolutely. You must be supremely naive not to believe that the DOJ and the FBI do not have the same relationship that they had with Twitter. And I think this is a show trial, as it were, this antitrust. At the end of the day, they're probably to come back and go, oh, no, we've been thoroughly convinced. There is nothing that is, antitrust about Google. They are encouraging a competitive market. Look at all the choices you have. What choices?
Yeah, no choices. Yeah, it is true. I mean, I think they're going to find something like nothing to see here, move along, we did our investigation, is on the up and up. And I wish that it'll be the Google files, not just the Twitter files, the Google files. I would love to see what this organization has been doing. So anyway, did you see Vimeo's actually censoring stuff now? It's kind of interesting.
I did.
They censored a video about children having surgery. So they call it hateful conduct, because they were just showing the fact that this is what happens to kids after they have reassigning surgeries, sexual reassigning surgery. So very interesting. David Listard, you're back with us.
Yes, had to take care of a couple things.
Yeah, just in time. David, did you see the what's been going on with Antifa going after cops, both in Georgia and in Portland?
Yeah, fortunately, they arrested quite a few of them.
Yeah.
Crazy rich people for whatever reason, want to declare war on cops, so.
But isn't this the result of what the administration has been all about? Like, defund the police, doing this. Now citizens are just basically taking their time and just going after cops, picking them off, shooting at them.
Yeah, a growing problem. But at the same time, other people are starting to arm themselves, knowing that they can't be protected from by the police because they have less police, less their response times are greater. But yeah, this cop land that which is supposed to help improve training of police officers, which is, the police officers
needed.
train a lot and they can get better, but they didn't, for some reason, they see that this new training facility is a horrible thing. These people have perverted minds and see the world in a perverted way. How did, and their defenders saying violence can't be against property, which is sort of a wild thing to say. I don't know how a person could say it's not violent,
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. And in Portland, I mean, you've seen it for like the last 3-4 years now. This takeover of Portland, and now it's even worse. I mean, at least in Georgia, they did something about it. In Portland, it didn't seem like to do too much about it. It's like a stronghold there of violence, especially against law enforcement.
Yeah. And it seems like these people travel to go do these things. They're not necessarily local people.
That's right.
They come from liberal centers where they have strongholds, and they make disciples, and then they go out and do it. And like, I think we saw that some of these that were arrested and were prosecuted were not from the states that they caused violence in.
What do you think the end game is with that, David? I mean, what do you think the end game is with law enforcement being decried as evil, police and defund the police, not obeying the police, calling them criminals, calling them racist? What's the end game? Is it just sheer violence?
Death by 1,000 cuts. America's being attacked from, and the Western world is being attacked from many different ways. Look, the climate change is one way, which is, that they're attacking us by making us pay so much more for energy, making us less efficient and not healthy as a nation. The debt and the corrupt government is making us weaker. The lack of people going to church anymore, the lack of people believing in God. The salt has lost its saltiness. It's the burning of forest fires, on purpose. People have been arrested. I know you had people that were arrested there in California. I know where you were in Davie, there were people that summer where you guys had all that people burning Australia. I think there were dozens that were caught, weren't they?
You talking up in Sydney that time?
Yeah, where they the forest fires. People were actually setting these fires. We saw some of the Amazon was set on fire purposely, even by the World Wildlife Fund. I think they were somehow involved in burning what they were being paid to take care of. It's just the world and the West are just being attacked from every point, from even false information is attacked, and censorship is attacked. Every nation in the world is trying to censor speech, which is a big thing. If they can make you shut up, then they can control us even more.
Yeah, I see.
By 1,000 cuts.
Death by 1,000 cuts. It's absolutely right. I think the end, and it may be a more nefarious end to this, is the fact that it's kind of like what we talked about, Gavin Newsom here, allowing in San Francisco, allowing the fentanyl, allowing the homelessness, allows them, of course, to have a bigger coffer, because they say, we need to fight against these things. We need to fight against violence. So we need a bigger budget. Then they don't do anything about it. It grows worse. And they finally had to say, and I think that's the end game, is now we need to bring real control. And I think the next level is, my personal opinion, is surveillance. Surveillance is the next step. Look at all this violence. We need it. And as Jacob has said in the past, the rise of dictators and totalitarian governments usually come from just chaos and people not being able to control, the chaos and the violence in society.
Yeah, I hate to bring up Nazism in the past, but they were the ones causing the problems in Germany. And that's, on the one hand, they burned the Reichstag and all that. And then on the other hand, they offered the solution, which, we can, they instill a fear, and people will do anything if they can have the chaos stop and their lives return to normal. So they gave themselves over in Germany to a dictator, a Hitler, a Fuhrer, that had nefarious plans, 1,000-year Reich that lasted, I think, a little over 12 or 13 years.
Just about that. Yeah, he had a 1,000-year plan. Just want to mention to everyone who's watching, thank you so much for watching and being with us live here. I know Jacob is not feeling well today, so we're filling in for him and doing very well. Thank you so much for watching us. And we wanted to let you know that we are going to take questions. David Lister came back just in the nick of time to take some questions.
Too early.
Yeah, sorry. Too early. Yeah, sorry about that. No, but send your questions in, and I'm starting to see a little bit of questions filtering in. Send your questions in. I think we had some from last week. I think we did, but I don't remember if we answered them all. We're always thankful that people send in questions. People want to know. We love to answer them. This is how we communicate and engage with those who are watching and those who follow Moriel teaching and those who follow Jacob's teaching. So thank you. Thank you so much. We've always been blessed to hear from believers around the world. Just one thing we want to come to the conclusion of catching up is the UN Security Council is holding emergency meetings against what's been going on in Israel. So the city of Jenin, which is in the West Bank, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing it right, Jenin, and or it might be Yenin, and there was a raid by the IDF this past week. Because of they found terrorists. You know, it's a hot contested area. David, you've been there. You've been to the West Bank.
Long time
We
ago,
couldn't
yeah.
even. Yeah, we couldn't even go this time. This past year with Jacob and the guys there, we couldn't even go. David was with us because of some of the riots that were going on there. Because there was a young man that was killed. They were protesting some Israeli officials being there, and it turned into a riot. Somebody shot someone. A young man died, unfortunately, and they just raided. They just stormed Nablus. And so now in Jenin, 9 people were killed. According to the reports, 9 Palestinians were killed by the IDF. Now, they haven't identified every one of them, but would imagine some of them are terrorists. That's what the IDF says. And then it began a barrage of rocket attacks from Gaza into Israel, and of course by Hamas, and Israel attacked back. Now the most terrible thing about all this is obviously the death of people, but now the UN Security Council, it's moving in by the UAE, China, and France, led by them, to hold Israel accountable for this. Hold Israel accountable for this. In the midst of course, we have an Israeli civil war perhaps starting. People that are against Netanyahu and their current government. David, you've been there to Israel. I've been there once this past year, and you see the tension there. Not only the Palestinians and the Muslims, of course, against Israelis and what's going on with the IDF, but also what's going on Jew against Jew. That they don't like this administration, the corruption, the religious aspect of the administration now. What's your take on the landscape of Israel? You got the wars, you got the attacks, and you got the political problem. They seem almost unsolvable, and you can't make heads or tails about it. But do try to help us.
Well, for me, Jerusalem has become a weight on the whole world. Of course, the Muslims have never wanted to stop stop fighting, but they've always desired to take back what they lost in the 47 war. And they desire all this. And so they never will quit. And of course, Iran is fomenting terror around the world. It's just the whole world is becoming unstable. Evil forces everywhere are rising up. It's almost like the book of Judges.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a great point.
Brother against brother. Even within our country here, there are people hating each other. They divided us over a vaccine, but it hasn't stopped there. It's divided liberal against conservative, Democrat against Republican. The whole world is a house being divided against itself.
That's a good point. In Israel, it's probably the most, you feel it the most, I guess, in Israel. Davey, when you were there with us in November, did you feel that sort of course there's always been tension, so I can't just say tension, you just feel tension, it's always there, but a different form of tension since you've been in the past. You've been there many times. Was there a sense of like, politically, hey, there's a lot of Jews that don't like other Jews because of this parliament in their parliament and their Knesset. Now you have Jews protesting, literally protesting outside Netanyahu in the city in Jerusalem because of some of the things that he's been doing and allowing some of the corruptions that he's been charged with, but also other members, of his coalition that are being charged with corruption, and people see it and nothing's being done about it. So there's Jew against Jew on the streets.
Yeah. It was actually good this time to actually talk to a lot more of the local believers there and get their thoughts and insights into what's going on. In previous years, the previous time I was there, we did come across some tension. We couldn't actually get to the city of David area because of basically they weren't happy with the construction that was going on in Silwan. So there were Palestinian activists were throwing rocks at vehicles and cars, which caused an accident, blocking the road, and that at the time. But this time, yeah, it's a lot more divided. It's a lot more divided country. Even a lot of people who like Netanyahu perhaps didn't vote for him this time because of the compromises he was going to have to make to form the government. There is a strong left too in Israel too. There is a strong left, just like we have here and like you've got in America. So it was not going to be an easy task for Netanyahu whatsoever. Actually, I think it was Bibi's son came out this week and went on a bit of a what do you call it? I'm going to call it a rant, but he basically went on a bit of a rant about Soros and the Sorosization of the government there. Yeah. Wow. So he copped a bit of flack for that, but it is quite a mess there at the moment.
Oh wow, yeah, I didn't know that. That's a good point. I think that you're right. So many different types of issues right now in Israel, including the civil war, and possibly, I'm not saying it is, but possible civil war. But the test of the government by some of these Jews, and some of it, of course, on the news becomes a little bit more hyped. People are simmering, and people are so concerned, and they are people concerned. There are people protesting. Plus, you got the rocket attacks coming in from Gaza.
Yes, and I was just going to add, the media there does tend to be a little bit left leaning, depending on the paper. But you've got Haaretz, which is really left leaning, but a lot of them do tend to lean towards the left.
Yeah, absolutely right.
But even in times of peace, Marco, when we would go into the West Bank, our bus was like bulletproof glass and, real thick. The bus was heavy, so it was kind of outfitted to help shield from bombs. That's in times of peace. So, and even throughout, there's always these concrete things they put up in the streets and in the roads that you can pull over in case people are shooting at you. So there's that peace is always this like super thin line over there, and it doesn't take much to move into war. It's always on the edge, the prefaces.
Jerusalem, right? Yerushalayim, the peace, city of peace. There's nothing there that is peaceful, and it's the tension, and it's being there with the missionaries there in November was quite amazing to see just how tense it is, especially in the Temple Mount area, especially in the old city. It becomes really difficult. It becomes really only the Lord can solve this.
And in the heartland, of Israel, up, you have so many places, and so many Muslims that are actually living and are citizens of Jerusalem. And so that's a tension point. Like when you go up into Nazareth and everything, there's, if I remember right, there's PLO flags there.
Oh, man.
They're always flying, letting them know. So Jerusalem would be a hard country to defend. It could easily be cut off in two, north from south. So it would be really easy for all these Muslim inhabitants and citizens to just cut them in two.
Incredible. So I guess we'll know more about it as the week goes on. Not only the protests against Netanyahu, but the attacks from Hamas. And you know, when Israel's having turmoil and tension like that, the terrorists love it, because they begin to even more the attacks and divide even more and cause panic and fear among the people. So we got to keep an eye on what Hamas is doing, and of course, never forget Hezbollah from the north. They can start launching attacks too. So when they sense weakness, which I don't think Netanyahu's weak, but weakness in a sense of how people respect them and how people back him up, I think it's going to be more trouble for Israel and at the moment. So I think it's always important to keep in mind, it's only Jesus, the Prince of Peace. It's only Christ who can bring peace. Until they look upon him whom they have pierced, Jerusalem will go through wars and desolation until the end. And that's what we're seeing until Christ comes, until we acknowledge the Holy One. Please send in your questions. We're about to just in a few minutes take them for David Lister. If Jay or Davey want to take any of these questions too, of course, we feel free to comment on it. Jay, any thoughts on Israel? I know it's always near the believers' heart in terms of what happens there. The city of the great King, the city of our Lord was crucified, when he rose again, and where he's going to come back. So it's at the heart of believers. But when you see this and what's going on there, what's your perspective on it?
Well, to me, it just reinforces scripture. David mentioned it earlier. You know, in the scriptures, we're told that he's going to make Jerusalem a heavy stone, which will crush all those who try to bear it. And he'll make it. You're seeing prophecy, you're seeing scripture playing out in real life when you have the entire world focused on Israel, the conflicts between the Palestinians and the Israeli. This is all very biblical, and it's crazy to me that we try to divorce scripture away from the current events, because you really lose a sense of your compass of what's going on when you try to do that.
You're absolutely right. Without the scripture, we just seem to be one of these scrimmages of, man against man, and, religion against religion, and that's just the Jews, it's just a Muslim, without really understanding the spiritual nature of it.
Pakistan and India are a perfect, a perfect kind of like way to frame it. You don't see the media coverage between the Pakistan and India border, which there are constant clashes.
Yes.
And Kashmir, it's a mess. Kashmir is a mess.
Constant. And we don't hear about the deaths of civilians on either side of the border. We don't hear about the attacks on either side of the border. Why is the world focused on this tiny little state which is not even the size of, I don't think any state is you could fit Israel into any state in the United States, but yet the entire world focuses on it. Why? Ask yourself that question. It's because God put his name there to dwell forever.
Yeah. Satan wants to destroy it. God has put his word and his name on it, and his the existence of Israel. It's based on God's promise, and God's name is written on that. So it's not going to happen. Not going to let it happen. But Satan is going to try to destroy him. He's tried it before. It's happened in history before, and it happened in the 20th century. It's happening in the 21st century, and at some point, the Antichrist will see to it to try to do that again. Very good point, Jay.
Marco, it's almost like evil. Forces of evil feel their time is near, and they're just rising up everywhere. If you want to make it incarnate, the one that's coming, his time is near. It's like, create all this chaos everywhere and then come in with a plan for peace.
That's a very good point. Kind of like the same thing we see with violence, right? Out of violence comes order, and that kind of order it's a new type of order to usher in the man of sin. And it's happening in the world, it's happening in Israel, and It is it's almost like the scripture. Satan knows, but his time is short. That's where he has great wrath. That's going to happen, of course, before the day of the Lord. But we're seeing it now. We're seeing it now, specifically within our lifetime. We're going to take some questions now. We got a few questions to go. So if you still have them, please send them in. We'd love to take them. But David, you ready?
As I can be, I guess. Yeah.
Hey, Marco, I just wanted to mention something real quick. In
Go
light
ahead,
that
brother.
I wish that Jacob were here today because something really fantastic has happened. For the first time in catching up with Jacob history, there are more people watching us on Rumble than on YouTube.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
We should let him know that.
I
Yeah.
think all of our friends are getting the message.
Yeah.
So thank you for those who moved over
Yeah.
to Rumble to watch today. We
Watch
really
Rumble.
thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate all those who watch. We're really trying to make the case that, because of the tech overlords and we're trying to provide an environment and a platform where we can actually teach the truth and speak the truth without being censored. And one way, if you're going to watch on YouTube, to beat it is share it and subscribe to it, like it, whatever you need to do, but share it. It's an important way and you can share those little memorial clips that we make during the week. Those are so easy to share, so easy to send to someone, and that definitely defeats it. But another note, Jay, I don't know if you knew, Rumble is getting into how would you call it? Netflix has got into the movie industry. Now they just make Netflix movies. Rumble's getting into that category too. They want to make documentaries specifically to Rumble, movies specifically to Rumble.
Oh.
Yeah, independent content creator, movie makers, filmmakers, similar to you, similar to other guys that can go, hey, we got a film, it's a short film, it's a 10-minute film, it's a episode, whatever you call it, can go to Rumble, they'll sponsor it, they'll feature it, they'll promote it, and so they're getting into it.
Oh, I'll give them a call.
Yeah.
May the Lord open the door.
Yeah. I think David wants to be in one of those feature films. I think that would be good.
Yeah, I'll be a villain. Yeah.
That's funny. All right, let's take some questions. And yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I just, I do look, we see all these things and these bad things happening, but also Jacob always reminds us, since he's not here, look, you can see all these things, but turn the coin over, because the other side of the coin, you have to look at all the bad things in light of all the good things that's coming.
Amen.
And then that gives us peace. And that keeps us focused on our real hope, that blessed hope. So no matter how bad things get, turn the coin over and look at all the good things. The Calvary will arrive on time.
Amen. And he'll be on time.
Yeah.
He seems
That's
late,
what
but
I
he's
meant,
never.
Calvary.
Yeah, exactly. He's never late. He's never. Maybe he seems like he's taking a long time, but he's never late.
But it's out of mercy that he's taking his time, because I still have a nephew. Some of you guys have relatives. All of us have relatives, and be thankful for God that he's given mercy, in time.
Yeah.
So
had the Lord come, 30, 40 years ago, I probably wouldn't be saved. It's just the mercy of God. David, here's a question. Does Daniel 11:38, which references the Antichrist as one who honors the God of fortress, indicate that the great wars must occur in his ascent to power? Does the reference of honoring the God of war, does that indicate the great wars must occur with his ascent to the power?
Well, the first seal opens up and he comes on the scene and he's given the power to bring war. So of course he's going to look. The devil's job is always simple: kill, steal, and destroy. So he is a God of war. He is a God of death. He is a God of destruction. And so all those things he will bring them.
Yeah, it's actually that's a good question. It's one of those passages. Daniel 11 is an amazing passage, and thank you for that question. Where people still debate in terms of how this is going to work, and of course, the background to it is Antiochus Epiphanes, who basically came with intrigue, came with peace, then began to censor the Jews. They couldn't read the law. They couldn't participate in the feast. Then they couldn't get circumcised, and slowly began to impose Greek Hellenistic culture on the Jews, and until they were so weak that they couldn't really resist anymore. And then he went in to try to destroy them through the abomination of desolation. Any thoughts on that, Jay or Davey, on Daniel 11, the God of
I have
Fortress?
one quick thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's important for us to, and help me if I've got the wrong chapter. Daniel chapter 7 has so many clues about the Antichrist. That's the right chapter, right?
Which one was it again?
With all the clues about Antichrist, he describes what he's like. I think it's Daniel chapter 9. There's like 75 or 80 thing, a master of disguise,
There's chapter 7 talks about the little horn. Chapter 11 might be chapter 7, but we can double check on that.
Let me grab my Bible. I'm sorry, but there's a great chapter that describes 70 and 90 things. I'm so distracted with what I had to do earlier. I'm sorry. So
no, that's okay. It talk about the 70th week of Daniel.
No, just about it talks about the Antichrist in terms, but
Okay.
I'll look it up while we're answering these questions.
No worries. Jay, any thoughts on Daniel 11?
Not really, Marco. I'll leave that to you guys.
Okay, no worries. Yeah. In the background to Daniel 11, it's really interesting. It was Antiochus Epiphanes who typifies, of course, the Antichrist, and he actually began to worship the God of Fortress. We would call his family worshiped a different god, and then he actually in his later years turned to the God of War within the Greek culture, and he began to worship it. So this really did happen in actual history, that Antiochus began to worship the God of War within Greek culture, because every family worships a certain god, and then he gave up the family god that they had, and then he turned to, and I forget who it is Ares. I think it's the God of War, which is the God of War. Yeah, and they began to worship him, and then eventually he put his own image on a coin. Yeah, and then he had Jupiter on one, and then him on the other side, and then eventually all the gods left, and then he was the only one on that coin. He removed all the gods.
I thought as well, when he placed his image of Zeus in the temple, that it was his image, like he was Zeus.
Yeah, he put his features, his own face on Zeus's statue.
Which that's strange, because that's almost like you will be like the gods. It's the whisper of the serpent from the garden.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, even his name, Epiphanes, right? Epiphany. It was like the revealing one. He named himself the one who was coming or to be revealed. So all these things are quite amazing. So thank you for that question, Daniel 11. Did you find out, David?
No, not yet. I'm looking.
No worries. Davey, any thought on Daniel 11 before we move on?
No, think we're all pretty good.
Okay, no worries, no problem. David, let me know when you find it, but I got to move to the next question. Is that all right?
Okay. Yeah.
There are two beasts in Revelation, two beasts. Could the second beast be the offspring of the first beast?
There's two beasts. If I remember, Jacob said that one comes from the land and one comes from the sea. So
yeah, Revelation
I
13.
don't think that you could say he's truly an offspring of him, but they're actually separate. If I remember.
Correct. Yeah. I think you're right. I don't think there is any anything that tells us that they're the second beast, which is the false prophet, is the offspring of the first beast, which is the Antichrist. All right, next question. What will Yahweh do about the NAR's future? I'm assuming this is a new apostolic reformation. Will Yeshua cast him away as I never knew you? What do you think, David?
Repeat that, the NAR?
Yeah, what will Yahweh do with the NAR's future, about the NAR's future? Will Yeshua cast him away as in I never knew you?
The New Apostolic Reformation.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's what that's what it is, NAR.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure
well,
it is.
let's see, look, the most of them are false prophets and false teachers. I think it's easy to put them in. Now, there may be some believers among them. You know, there's always good people and bad denominations and that's, but false teachers and false prophets, we know they lead people in and they both go into the ditch.
Yeah, if anybody doesn't know, that New Apostolic Reformation is it's a big movement. In fact, David, you knew them before they were New Apostolic Reformation. They were in Dominionist, they were in different camps and categories before, until in the hyper charismatic and the Dominionist, they sort of funneled into this new movement with some word of faith aspects, some Dominionist aspects, some Reconstructionist aspects. And now they're the New Apostolic Reformation. Basically, the apostles and prophets need to be restored back to the church, to the old restorationist movement, right? In order for the church to be well with Christ and then bring Christ back to a dominant church, a church that dominates the world through the 7 mountain mandates. That's basically, in a nutshell, what the New Apostolic Reformation is.
Yeah, they brought all their false teaching in with them, and they recycle it, and some of the false teachings that didn't work or didn't go over good, they've learned not to use that, but they're all teaching, false things, false doctrine, and misleading many. In fact, they're even bigger and stronger now than before, and that's what's making them even more popular. How could they be wrong? But they're bringing in a lot of money through books, through conferences, and they're getting into more mainline things, and they're actually trapping younger people with the music and the Led Zeppelin concerts by the guy that thinks he's a god. His name is
Stephen Furtick.
Stephen Furtick, going to disciple his kid into Led Zeppelin. Well, let me tell you, Led Zeppelin is evil, if you don't figure it out. But all of their teachings were hyper charismatic, and they were all false, and everything they got blessed from, one of their big teachers is Dr. Michael Brown, predicted things wrong. He claimed to be the apologetic master of the Brownsville false revival in Pensacola, Florida, but nobody holds him accountable for that. He taught that was a true move of God. I told him the place would be divided and he would leave, and they kicked him out, and he went off, and now everybody thinks he's a great teacher, but he's predicted things in the name of the Lord. Jacob tried to, when he was going to debate him, he accepted it, but then canceled last minute when they found out Jacob had the audio file of him predicting a second Pentecost. But everybody gives all these false teachers a pass because they can bring in money, and people are actually they may not support it, and they may know these things, but they actually tolerate it. That's what's really bad, is that they don't stand up and shoot wolves, and lambs are falling by the thousands to them.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't know anything about Michael Brown, there's plenty of stuff on Sandy Simpson's website. The Leslies have written about the NAR movement as well. So there's a lot of information, even on Moriel.org, about warning about Michael Brown and the NAR movement. It's pretty big in Israel. It's Tikkun, and we're going to be hopefully talking about that later on this year in some of our new podcasts. So more to come, but it's a very dangerous movement. It is by far the biggest because it's infected most denominations up to this point. So I think the NAR is a false gospel, false believers, false teachers, and a false Jesus that they're promoting, because that Jesus does not exist in the scripture. So that's it for all the questions. We're going to move into backstage. So let's move to backstage. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching and being with us on YouTube and on Facebook Live. We're going over to backstage so we can talk about some of these things. We've got some real powerful videos from Project Veritas and James O'Keefe. And we'll be talking about some of the things that they've been able to find out that we can't talk about it here. And especially about some procedures that have been forced upon people, what Canada's doing, regarding that, and some Christian persecution, and Andy Stanley talking about, some people having more faith than Christians. So more of that to come. So join us on Backstage.
Hey, you all know me. It's Jay from Moriel. Usually behind the scenes, as you know, we've been shadow banned on YouTube. If you have a friend, if you have a family member, if you have another person that you know is a brother or sister in Jesus Christ, we ask you to reach out to them. Ask them to subscribe, send a link, press like, leave a comment. All of these things help in a major way to help the ministry and help the channel grow. Thank you for your time, and thank you for watching Moriel TV.